Oh, man, how you doing? Good. Always. Every class. Like everything good technically? That's good. All right. I make things have to go on you. I'm good. I'm surprised. This new Zoom thing is the pain. All right. Everybody's running a little late for now, huh? All right. Any questions or anything like that? No. All right. Last week, hopefully everyone gets everything in prior to um Sunday. So looking forward to reading about your paper, checking out the presentation and such and all that good stuff, right? So we're gonna go into a quick lecture, and then after that we'll jump into the final, okay? And again, the final, open book, open PowerPoint, open notes, just no internet, okay? So make sure you abide by those rules. Okay, so today we're going to talk about corporate governance and ethics, okay? And so, a lot of companies, especially nowadays, have a big emphasis or push on corporate governance, right? And everybody understands the concept of corporate governance somewhat, a little bit, okay? So basically, corporate governance is just the rules that the board or the company kind of operates in internally to make sure that no ethical, moral, or any issues or things that may seem not strange, but may seem unethical or immoral don't necessarily occur, or we check those things first as far as the sounding board, right? We just kind of talk about it amongst each other and then see if those things are legal and if they're ethical at the same time, right? That's what we're leaning towards, right? To make sure that nobody does anything that they shouldn't be doing, right? Such as embezzling funds, signing off on documents that they're not authorized to sign off of, doing things that is in their best interest and not in the best interest of the corporation or the organization itself, right? And so when you talk about corporate governance, you're really trying to make sure that everything is done above board, within the law, and also is ethically sound and morally sound as far as behavior within the company and the board specifically and the executives, really, right? So it's kind of a checks and balances for those guys up there because really, as you get closer to the top, there's not too many checks and balances, especially between the board and the CEO and the COO, right? Because the CEO, come on in, the CEO, oh, hey, come on in. The CEO, in conjunction with a few other people, they pick the board. Okay, and board members can come from anywhere, all right? Most boards are comprised of primarily of people that are outside of the organization, right? As a disinterested third party. They get paid usually a certain amount of money. They typically don't have any real ownership in the company, right? Which makes them kind of, a good objective board member, right? But they usually get paid in the upward between 50 to maybe $200,000, right? And they have to come to quarterly meetings and meetings as necessary, right? But most of them, I would say, especially the higher profile ones, typically don't do too much boarding. They get paid to be on the board, but it's really about status, right? Oh, who's on your board? Elon Musk, Nancy Pelosi, like Donald Trump. Half the time, they don't show up. Okay, they're just there really as what's happening? Okay, anyway, so they normally don't show up, right? They normally are there in name, and no most boards, in order to form a quorum, right? Anybody else a quorum? So for things to pass or for certain policies to be approved, there has to be a quorum, okay? And a quorum basically is a certain amount of votes that are in the affirmative or the negative that say that this meeting had enough people for us to make a decision about something, right? So quorum is normally at least 3 people, right? But it depends on how big the board is and that kind of thing, right? If you don't have quorum, but you have a meeting, right? And there's a policy or initiative that you're trying to pass, but you don't have quorum, then that means you didn't have enough people to really vote on it and say, okay, yes, this is legal and binding, and we're gonna go ahead and move forward with that, right? And so you'll see that a lot of times in Congress, especially Congress, the Senate, right? In the past, we've had votes go to the floor, and like half of Congress or half of the Senate won't show up. Okay, that's because they know in order to get quorum, if it's a simple majority, right, they need 50%, 51% or more, right? If it's a super majority, right, they need 2/3 votes. You understand? So without that 2/3 vote, that thing's not gonna pass. But if you show up, you normally typically have to vote. So in order not to vote, they don't show up, right? If they don't show up and we don't have quorum, then that meeting is basically useless, and we have to bring the topic up again when we have enough people to form a quorum.
Are boards only established after a company goes public?
No, they're usually established before. Yeah, most companies have their boards established way before they even like start anything, right? And the board may expand, you know, once they go public or once they start to grow in operations, right? They want different people on the board, different perspectives. But normally you have to, when you incorporate, you have to give them the names of people that are owners, and you have to give them people that are owners and board members or just board members alone, right? And so you can have just the board just as a placeholder and not have any board members as of yet, right? But the board is formed and it has to be registered with the state, wherever you incorporate. They have to know who is on the board, right? Every time there's a change on the board, you have to update that information with the state and the SEC and all these other folks, right? Because they want to know who has input into what. There may be some boards where they may want a particular individual and they go, nope, that's a conflict of interest because this person is involved in this entity. Or you'll find that most people that are in politics typically are not on boards, not until after they get out of the politics game, you know. So like Condoleezza Rice, for instance. Anybody know where she started at? All right. Condoleezza Rice was actually worked for Chevron, which was owned by the Bushes at one point. All right. They had a huge majority stake in Chevron, the oil company. Come on in. And Condoleezza Rice was on the board at one point, and that's how she kind of got into the whole like political thing, right? They kind of brought her along and said, "Hey, you're a board member, but we really like your work. We think you're intelligent," and they kind of brought her into the administration as they moved progress, right? So you'll find that a lot of people on different boards, and they could be on numerous boards, like 5, 6 different boards, and really not be actively involved. Okay, so that's really where corporate governance comes from, right? And they really handle some of the rules and some of the misbehavior, some of the things that go on at the higher levels, as far as, you know, bad behavior, unethical stuff that's not necessarily illegal, but it's really, you know, that gray area, and they don't want it to necessarily get out. They kind of handle that in-house, okay? But again, the whole point of having corporate governance is to make sure that all the P's and Q's are, you know, kind of being followed, right? And all the rules are being followed. There's no shady stuff going on in the background that we're not aware of, right? Because anything that you do internally, be it any individual, no one's going to look at that individual and say, oh, you messed up. They're going to look at the company and say, your company is jacked. You guys screwed up, right? Because you didn't have any internal controls to make sure that this did not happen, right? So in any of the cases that we're familiar with, like Theranos, right? From with Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, with the fake blood testing and all that other stuff, right? It's supposed to revolutionize, you know, blood testing and all this other stuff. She was named like one of the richest women in the world at one point and all this other stuff, right? Come to find out, it was all garbage, okay? Well, part of the problem was that her board kind of just went along with what she said. They didn't do their due diligence and really check on things, right? They took her word for it that she was working with all these people. She was kind of, you know, taking the engineers, the low-level engineers, and kind of manipulating the data and stuff like that, right? Those are all things that the board and corporate governance are there for, to make sure that the CEO doesn't have any undue influence on the, you know, on the decision making and some of the things that go on, right? Because in many instances, the CEO's salary is attached to the company's performance, right? And so, and the way they measure the performance, if you're publicly traded, is what? If you're publicly traded, how is the performance measured for the most part? Stock, okay? The stock price, okay? And the stock price can fluctuate from one point to the next in minutes, right? Hours, days, weeks, whatever, right? You can go from $1 here to $2,000 in a, you know, blink of an eye, depending on the situation. So sometimes it's difficult to ask the CEO to be objective when you know that his or her particular salary is attached to the stock price. And for them, if they can keep the stock price at a certain point, right, at a certain date, they're guaranteed a certain amount of money, regardless if the stock price tumbles. Doesn't matter. right? They have triggers in there that if this date, for instance, like President Trump, right? He has the media company. You guys familiar with the media company, Donald J. Trump, whatever media, right? Came out, was at 60 something dollars, whatever the case may be, right? But he couldn't cash in any shares, right? He had to wait. There's a holding period, or what they call a cool off period, right? No one can sell shares, and after they have to wait. I think it was 180 days after the initial IPO or the IPO. Okay, so the board can waive that if they want. They can say, okay, no worries, don't worry, we'll waive that, but they didn't, right? Because everybody understood that particular company is tied to Donald Trump. As he goes, the company goes. So he also came out and was like, hey, I'm not going to, sell the shares once I become eligible. But once he did become eligible, right, the trigger for that is that the stock price had to stay at a certain amount for a certain period of time, and then he would get additional 5% shares. Okay. So for him, it was important that the stock price stay in the 20s, between the $25 and $30 mark. Okay. If it went below that and the date came, which I can't remember what the date was, and the date came and the stock price was below $25, he would not get these additional 5% or a million shares or whatever it is, right? So that day came, the stock price was at $28, so he made the cutoff, the trigger, so he gets the additional $1 million shares, right? But after that, if it tanks, if it goes down below 25, it doesn't matter. He's gotten his thing, right? But all the action that he took leading up to that point, right, may have been in the best interest for him, but not in the best interest of the company, right? And so this when corporate governance steps in and says, look, Donald, this decision you made, right, is not really conducive to company growth. It's not conducive to the mission. We're not really sure how this lines up with our organizational mission. Like, explain it to us, okay? And so if he can't really tie it into some business objective or something that makes sense for the corporation, then they're gonna say, hey, you know what? We love to, let you this, but this doesn't make any sense, right? And so this is why a lot of companies rely heavily on the corporate governance piece to make sure that things are being done correctly, specifically too when it comes to accounting and finance. Okay, and if you guys remember, in Enron, right? I don't know if you guys even know the Enron. No, okay. So Enron was I forgot what Enron did. Um, they did merger and acquisitions and some other stuff, but they were a financial services company, right? But the whole time, Enron, they were cooking the books. Okay, they were saying they had this much money, liquid assets, all this stuff, right? But they all knew that they didn't. Okay, there was no corporate governance. The CEO, COO, the CFO, these guys were doing whatever they wanted to do. Nobody was telling them, hey, this is not right. This is illegal. You can't, you're duping investors, right? Gonna find out all the numbers were fake, right? And at that point, Enron was a major player in the stock market, one of the anchors, right? And you guys understand that, like companies like Microsoft, Apple, some of these bigger companies, like the top 10 companies, they anchor the markets. Okay, they have the majority of the market. So if Microsoft stock tumbles, whatever market it's in tends to tumble too, right? If it goes up, that market or that index, right? That exchange, right? The New York Stock Exchange, the Dow, the S&P 500, the Chicago Board, CBOE, those kind of things, right? Those markets. As those particular companies go, right, depending on how big or small they are as far as the number of shares they have within that exchange, they can drag the market down or they can drag the market up. Okay. And so it's important that companies have corporate governance to make sure that people aren't doing things that are going to affect the market as a whole, right? And Enron end up having, their whole C-suite basically in cahoots, knowing that the company was lying. They went ahead and did some shady stuff. Well, they had a large portion of the market of the exchanges, and so they tumbled, which triggered the crisis the financial crisis in 2000, I think it was 2000 or something like that. We had a financial crisis because Enron basically was doing some shady stuff, and the money that they said they had, they didn't have, right? Just like a couple years ago, we had the whole Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all those big financial companies, right? They weren't doing anything necessarily when they were fudging numbers, right? Not to that degree, but some of the derivatives or some of the instruments they had were not really good, right? They were relying on very much like junk bonds, right? Anybody understand junk bonds, sort of? Okay. So they were relying on worthless assets, basically, right? And putting them all together and saying, oh, this is a great instrument because it has this, this, and this, and this. Where it's like, oh, it was a toilet bowl company. It was a company that made, paper, or a company that was a company in name but really didn't do anything. Okay. And they just put all these companies in one fund, okay, and then they sell shares to that fund, all right? And so I get money for the shares of that fund, but the fund is trash. There's nothing in there of value, right? That's where the junk bond thing comes from, okay? And so a lot of companies were doing that to raise capital, right? And just creating these fictitious funds that were really worthless and not being gonna be doing anything. No one's gonna make money except for the people that were on the other end of this kind of apparatus, right? We had it with the mortgage crisis, right? We had prime rates, and where people would necessarily. So what banks would do is they would take all the high risk loans that they put out, and they would put them all in this one fund, and they would sell shares of the fund, knowing that, understanding the principles of lending to high risk folks, that more than likely 40 to 50% of those folks were going to default on the loan because they couldn't afford it. They were over leveraged, right? And this is where we got the housing bubble, okay? Because people had loans that they couldn't afford because of different ways that they kind of structured these loans, right? Hey, put down $1,000 and then in 5 years, you just have to pay $100,000. For most people, that's not realistic. Okay, but that's kind of how they were structured, right? Or hey, the first year you have a adjustable rate of 0.2%, but come year three it jumps to 6%. Okay, so you have a $300 mortgage, in 5 years it's going to jump to $2,000, right? Again, not something that's sustainable for most folks, right? This is a huge shift. So all those particular instruments were put into another instrument and sold as a fund, and that was used to back certain things. Once that starts collapsing, right, everything it's supporting starts to collapse also, right? And that's how we had the housing bubble, right? Because people basically went into foreclosure at a mass rate because they couldn't afford to pay these particular homes that they really couldn't afford to begin with, right? It was just the way it was structured as far as the loan goes, right? And so, when you have, companies, one of the major things about um, serving the public and having a company is that there's some degree of trust. Okay, I have to trust you as an as a business entity that you're going to deliver and do the things you say you're going to do, right? Because I'm paying you, I'm giving you a certain amount of money, right? If you know from the very beginning that you are running a company that's based on lies and fraud and just not real, right? But you're taking my money, right? That's a breach of trust, right? And what that does, it erodes everything else, okay? It erodes the trust between legitimate business and people that are doing the right thing, right? This is why Ponzi schemes have a big impact. Bernie Madoff's, right? Sam Friedman, all right? All what's his name? The CEO from not Bitcoin. Wow, what's his name? One of the cryptocurrency exchanges. He just went down. I can't remember. Key Wong or something like that, right? Right. All these guys, right? People trust them, right? Just like if you go and you have a financial advisor, right? And I think we talked about this before, a fiduciary relationship, right? It's a relationship of trust. I trust that you're gonna do what's in my best interest as your client, right? Whereas before, It wasn't like that. There was no fiduciary. It was basically companies would get your money and they would pick the instruments or things that made them the most money through fees, just through straight up, taking your money and putting it elsewhere and investing it in things that they thought were important. Okay. And so the trust was in there. This is how we lost trust in the whole financial services market because people were really realizing, like, so I'm paying you $1,000 in fees every couple of months or whatever, but my money's not growing, but you're making record profit. Like, what's going on here? Like, where's the money going to all the money you're making? Like, you guys are making it, right? Your salary is $50 million, right? Meanwhile, I've invested my $1,000 and it's now worth $500. Like, I don't get that. That doesn't make any sense, right? You guys seen Wolf of Wall Street, right? Yeah, okay. True story, right? And if you ever watch an interview with the real person, right? He's very interesting, okay? And you'll talk about how easy it is to gain people's trust once you start talking about things that seem too good to be true, okay? Invest $1,000 in a year, it'll be worth $1 million. That's ridiculous, okay? There's no such return, right? None. Unless you're talking about, well, now maybe cryptocurrency, maybe if it just explodes and there's some weird anomaly in the air. Okay, this doesn't work that way, right? But people have this way of trusting people when things sound very good. Okay, they let their guard down and they believe the con men. They believe the people that are trying to take advantage of them, right? So corporate governance is there to make sure that, look, we don't do anything that's illegal. We don't do anything that's unethical. We try to be fair as possible. We try to make sure we keep to our promises, right? But it really is an internal function to make sure nothing externally is affected, okay? Because one executive's bad decision can lead to the demise of a company, right? So it's very easy, as we can see, that if you go around spending money that's not yours, or you go around allocating funds or moving things around that's not really yours, right? Or you don't have you want to do something else with it, right? You have your self-interest at heart, illegal, right? White collar crimes for the most part. You're going to prison. Okay, white collar crimes before corporate governance and before really, some of these ethical issues, you could do white collar crime and basically you'll get fined and then you wouldn't have to go to prison, right? That changed probably like 10 years ago where they started hammering people like, okay, you want to do white collar crime? You affected this many people's lives, you're going to prison now, right? And Bernie Madoff was like a fine example of somebody that serious crimes, right? Over an extended period of time, I think he got 65 years. Well, he got life plus 65 or something crazy. No, he got 365 years. Bernie Madoff got something ridiculous. Okay. So because they wanted to make sure that people understood like Ponzi schemes are not going to be tolerated, right? Because Ponzi schemes have been around for the longest time, right? And we have multi-level marketing that kind of play like Ponzi schemes, right? What's it called? Neutral Life or Herbalife, right? It's a legit company, but it relies on you bringing more people in, right? And that you make more money the more people you bring in, right? But if you have one good person that's a really hot seller, then you're gonna make money, right? But if that hot seller is making great moves for you, they're not really benefiting from all that money they're making, right? They have to bring somebody else in. They have to build the pyramid, right? So whoever's at the top of the pyramid is the person making the most money. The people at the bottom, they don't make any money, right? Because they need to bring people in. The point is to build your own pyramid, sort of, right? And that's one thing, right? But Ponzi schemes are a whole different story where you're taking the money, you're saying you're doing one thing with it, but you actually aren't, right? And you'll notice that most of the organizations with those Ponzi schemes, they're very flat. Okay? They're very flat, very horizontal in nature. They're not vertical at all, right? Or very vertical, I should say, not horizontal, right? If you have a traditional company, it's somewhat horizontal. CEO, CFO, compliance, HR, you have all these people, then you have your next layer of kind of leadership, right? in the companies that are kind of doing shady stuff, it's like the CEO, maybe one other person, and one other person, and neither of them have access to anything. Okay, there's one person or two people that have access. Everybody else, nobody knows what's going on. Okay, boards are in charge of all that, right? We need to see what's going on, and boards at the end of the day have the final decision-making authority. Although they are hired or brought on by the CEO, boards can fire the CEO. They can fire whoever they want. Okay, they come together and they have to get a quorum, right? They have to get a somewhat of a consensus or majority to say, look, yes, we're going to get rid of the CEO, unless the CEO is the majority holder of the company. Exactly. Okay. That's the case with him. That's the case with Mark Zuckerberg, right? This is the case where we have Steve Jobs. Although he was the originator and the CEO, he was not the majority owner of Apple when they fired him. So the board got together because they didn't like the way direction he was going in, and they let him go because he only had, I think, at that point, 40%, right? So one of the first things he asked for when he came back, when they asked him to come back, he needed 51%, and they gave it to him. That way, he couldn't be fired by the board, right? They would have to go to him and ask him to resign or to be moved, right? Which for them, fortunately, they went back and got him because he propelled them in a different direction. And we have Apple the way it is because of Steve Jobs. It really is because of him. This is probably one of the few cases where you can say this one man is the reason why this company is this way, right? Because he was just extremely innovative, just was the way ahead of everybody in his thought process, right? But they got rid of him. Okay. And so boards aren't, infallible. Boards make mistakes and that kind of thing. But again, there's checks and balances to make sure that we are doing the right thing and that we're not trying to, kind of get over. Okay. And we talked about that. Okay. Let me see. All right. So I talked about fiduciary already, but let's talk about conflict of interest, right? And how it kind of plays a role, specifically when I was talking about how the pay is attached to performance. Okay, on paper it sounds great. Your pay is attached to your performance. You got stock options. You got all this stuff, right? Convertible bonds, convertible warrants, whatever, bearer bonds, whatever the case may be, right? But if you're the CEO and 80% of your salary is attached to performance, right? What do you think you're worried about? Right? The performance of the company, right? Which is what it's built to do, but how is it measured? Are we measuring by the stock price? Or are we measuring by the end of year profits? Okay. And so a lot of companies are now shifting to end of year profit, vice earnings per share. Okay, because that's really the metric that they're looking at. What is the earnings per share? When we have earnings calls and it says, oh, earnings per share is increased by 2 cents. We think the earnings per share would be 51 cents. It's really 53, or it's 48 cents instead of being 50 like we thought, right? There's a shift in stock price. Okay, because people go, oh, you said it was going to be 50 cents, but it actually turned out to be 48. So your management is underperforming. Why should I invest in your company? I'm going to divest myself of your company and go over here and invest my money because their earnings per share are doing well, right? And it directly is correlated to, revenue and profits, but it's other things that play into earnings per share, right? And deciding as to whether or not we made enough money for the shareholders. Because in the 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s, the most important person in the room was the shareholder. Forget the workforce, forget the public, forget the patron. The shareholders were the most important people, okay? Because they're the investors. They're the ones, and I'm not talking about shareholders like us. I'm talking about shareholders, private shareholders. People that, behind the scenes and say, look, I'm going to give you $6 million, okay? And I'm buying it at par, right? So if I'm buying it at par, so real quick, so the way the stock market works, and you guys may already understand this, right? The stock price that you see on the news or when you go buy your stock, that's not the face value of the stock. Okay. Not at that, maybe at that point, right? But not internally. Stock prices par is 1 cent. Okay, that's where you start. And then from there, if I say, look, I want to invest $6 million, but I want my shares at par. Okay. And so I don't want it to be after it hits the market. I want it before it hits the market. Right. And you guys see why. Why would I want my shares before it hits the market versus after it hits the market? I buy more shares, right? But why did I can buy more shares? It's cheaper, right? It's cheaper. That's why when you see IPOs and you see anything related to investment, they're always on the front end, right? They always in the beginning, right? Because that's when the stock is going to be the cheapest, right? Because your promise to them is that if you buy this stock at 1 cent or whatever the par value is, when we IPO, you're guaranteed an increase, right? There's no IPO in history that hasn't increased when it's been introduced. So if you buy at $20, at the end of the day, after the IPO, it may be worth 60. Okay? That's how you make the money. That's how they make their money. All right. The key is that the stock price has to stay up because there's that 6-month period where I can't do anything. I can look at it all day. I can calculate all the future earnings, but I can't touch it. Okay. I have to wait for this 180 days. Once that 180 days hits 181, I get 12:01 a.m. on 181, I can cash out all my stuff, right? And you hope that the stock price stays up. Okay. Because then you can cash out, recoup all your money, right? Or make a profit on your money, right? And still maintain a certain piece of ownership if you want, right? Or you can just divest yourself altogether, call it a day. I helped you out. I made $40 per, basically however many dollars it costs. So make if it was $20 per share and it goes up to 60, they made $40 per share. Okay. If they bought it at $20 and they had a $6 million, that's what 300,000 shares or something like that, times 40, they just made a cool, whatever, $12 million extra on their money. Something like they doubled their money or whatever. Yeah, they doubled their money. Okay. So that's how it all works, right? But that goes in line with insider trading, right? Which is a definite violation of fiduciary, right? Sarbanes-Oxley, and just other ethical and moral standards that we have in place, right? Everybody familiar with Martha Stewart, right? And her going to prison, right? She went to prison for insider trading, right? Because somebody she knew gave her a tip because he was on the inside. He gave her a tip like, hey, you need to invest in this because they're going to IPO here in the next couple months. You didn't hear it from me though. Okay. And so that's what she did. She made, I think it was some crazy amount of money. And then boom, found out that she had inside information. It doesn't matter whether or not you know it's illegal. It's illegal. You profited. You got to pay the price. Okay. And they put people in jail for that stuff. Right. If you look at what is it? Emoluments clause. Okay, everybody familiar with emoluments clause? Okay, so emoluments clause is basically a clause that really applies mostly to presidents, vice presidents, people that are in political office. Okay, and what it says is that you have to divest yourself of any businesses that you're in. You cannot accept presents over $20. Okay. But specifically, the emoluments clause is about divesting yourself of business ownerships and business ventures, right? And so, as a case study, when we look at Donald Trump, he violated the emoluments clause because what he did, which is legal, he shifted all the ownership to the kids, right? And part of the emoluments clause is that you don't have any say so in the day-to-day operations of the company, right? You have no ownership. You can transfer that ownership, we understand that, right, to somebody that's going to manage it, manage the company, lead the company in your stead while you're over here fulfilling your public obligation, right? And so he transferred that over to his kids, right? But the problem is that his kids were still coming to him for decision-making thing on a day-to-day basis for day-to-day operations, which is illegal. Okay. Now, why do you guys think that the emoluments clause is something that is put in place to begin with? Why would I have a clause like that? Why would I have a law like that? Absolutely, right? The president has purview and perspective on insight on pretty much everything that goes on in the world, right? We're not just talking about the United States, in the world, right? So let's just say, for instance, the president was majority owner or owner in Smith and Wesson, or in some kind of munitions company, okay? And then now all of a sudden, this Israeli, Palestine, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran thing is going off, right? Guess what they need? Weapons. They need bullets, right? They need ammunition, right? What is the function of the United States at this moment within that whole conflict? What are we trying to do? What's that? Providing aid, right? But at the end of the day, what are we really trying to do?
They were trying to be the middleman between negotiations.
Right? We're trying to end the war, right? We're trying to negotiate, be ambassadors, be mediators, be middleman, and trying to alleviate this conflict, right? Same thing with kind of Ukraine and Russia, right? Don't do a good job of it, but because Russia doesn't trust us, nobody trusts us, but that's another story, right? So that's our aim, right? But what if the president was interested in Smith and Wesson and all these other things, right? Was like, you know what, I could make some serious money off of this. Why don't you guys hold off on the negotiations, or let's make it really tough in the negotiations, right? People may think that he's doing it for a, benevolent or for a real purpose, right? But the purpose could be so that he can enrich the company because he knows that Israel, all these people are getting aid and assistance from the United States, right? Or Ukraine, right? We sent billions of dollars of armament to Ukraine. We sent billions of dollars of stuff to Israel, right? Those companies are making money off conflict, right? Don't let anybody fool you. War is money, okay? People get rich off conflict. That's why conflict is so pervasive, because there's so many different things going on. People make a lot of money in death, all right? And so if you have someone who has a vested interest in a company that is providing armament to a company that's involved in conflict, right? You know the company's gonna make lots of money, which is gonna enrich the company, which directly enriches you, right? Because the stock price is gonna go up, although temporarily, because everybody understands, like, hey, war is gonna eventually end at some point, right? It's gonna go up temporarily, right? Just enough time for me to make 10, 15, $20 million, and I can be out. Okay, I can move, I can go, right? And so because of that, we don't want public officials, political officials to have any interest in any company. It doesn't matter. If you're in an official public capacity, you are not allowed to have any business ventures, any interest in any business entities. You have to transfer those things, let those things go, right? And I'm not saying let them go. You have to just give them to somebody else to control. Okay. And you also have to separate yourself from the day-to-day operations of it, right? It kind of has to be on its own independent, not relying upon you for any input about anything, okay? And that didn't happen within the Trump presidency. Some things he divested himself from, other things he kind of kept, because he had a lot of stuff. I think Donald Trump had over 170 different contractual agreements and stuff like branding deals, and they're very complicated in the pay structure, and it's a very convoluted thing, right? Especially when we start talking about, oh, he owns Mar-a-Lago, right? So if he owns Mar-a-Lago and he's contracting Mar-a-Lago to do events, right? And I'm pretty sure you guys have heard this, right? He's contracting Mar-a-Lago, or they're contracting Mar-a-Lago to host events for the president. Wherever the president goes, what else goes with him? Secret Service, right? FBI, all kind of security. Who pays for those guys? Right? Who pays the $365 a night room? Or it's now $600 a night room. It's $365 for you and me, but for the president and the Secret Service, it's $600. Okay? Although that should be reversed. The government rate's supposed to be cheaper than the published rate, than the public rate, right? But somehow that doesn't work out, right? It's more. Okay? And so there's a conflict of interest there that really didn't sit well with a lot of people, all right? But Donald Trump didn't care. He would host events at Mar-a-Lago, and basically the government was paying him to host events at his place, where he lives, basically. Okay? So there was definitely a conflict of interest in which they were like, okay, we can only do so much, right? We can force him, and if on paper he's not, majority controlling the data operation, there's really not much we can do. But we know, hey, this is his house, this is his mansion, this is his resort. It's gonna benefit him because he's gonna get out of office eventually, right? And so we're making all these deals, right? And instead of cutting the government a deal, he gouged the government. Okay? He gouged himself, basically. You're the president. You jack the prices up because you already knew that the government can do that, right? If necessary. Okay, because there's no price limit, there's no price tag on how much the government pays for the housing of Secret Service agents and that kind of thing. It could be $1,000 a night, they gotta pay. Doesn't matter, right? So basically he said, hey, I'm not gonna lower, because he could have done it for free. Okay. Although he says, oh, we only charge the government $200 because they have to charge something. Not really, but they have to charge at least $1, right? He could have done it for $1. He could have done it like at low cost, but he didn't, right? Or I would say his family didn't, because he technically didn't have any input on that, right? So you see where there's a conflict of interest. There's a conflict where the emoluments clause and some of these other clauses have been violated. Some of these laws have been violated, right? And this is kind of the crux is where, Donald Trump is always in trouble. He's always in the limelight. They're always coming after him. The whole judgment that he got in New York for 265 million or 85 million, whatever it was, right? Because of all the fraudulent loans that he got based on the ballooned and elevated appraisals of his properties, right? He may think it's no foul, no harm because everybody made money or everybody was made whole, but at the same time, you lied, okay? You misled the investors, you misled the public because those funds are people's money. The bank doesn't own any money. It's our money, okay? And so the bank has to be really particular about how they lend out money and what they're doing with the money. The government even more so, because again, it's the people's money. That's why the government has a lot of red tape when it comes to money, right? This is why there's an issue with forgiving school loans, because now it's like, oh, this was the government's money, this was the people's money, and now you don't repay the government, right? Because you want to forgive school loans. So that's another argument, right? But at the end of the day, right, the corporate governance is really about trying to make sure that conflicts of interest are resolved in a proper way, that there's no ethical laws being violated, people aren't embezzling or taking advantage of the system, and that there's fiduciaries, okay? That really behave in the way they should be, okay? Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, all right? This is something that President Obama put in effect, okay? Basically, the gist of it is that, let me see, I think, all right, these are the different sections that really apply to corporate governance and boards, right? Section 201, service outside the scope of auditors, section 307, 301, 307, okay, 4, 4, 4, 6, and 4, 7, right? And most of these were really built around the fact of that companies were had bad accounting practices. Okay. So by law, a publicly traded company has to have an auditor come in basically every 5 years or so to do a full scale audit on their organization, right? Most companies have an audit every year or so. Pretty mild, just come in, take a look at the book. The auditor, it's supposed to be objective third-party auditor, right? But what was happening is that they would go out to these big firms, KPMG, Anderson, I can't remember the rest of their name, Anderson or Eli Lilly, right? All these big companies say, hey, we need an audit, whatever. These companies would use the same auditor time, over time, each time, right? And so what happened is you get friendly with the auditor, right? As a company, they kind of become family. They see him every year for the little audits, and then they see him every 5 years for the big audits, right? After a while, it's no longer objective, right? If I'm coming to your company and I'm auditing your company, you put me up in the Ritz-Carlton, you're like, hey, come to the barbecue. Let's go to the bar. Let's go hang out, right? Let me tell you about, yeah. So you're gonna see something on the spreadsheet on the books. Let me explain that to you real quick. Let me tell you what that it looks funny, but it really isn't, right? And that's what was happening. So these auditors would go in and they would surface level. It's done on paper. Cool. Check. No problem. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Oh, he explained that to me. All right, cool. They're good. They're abiding by all the laws, all the internal controls. Everything is good to go. They're a law-abiding company that's following the rules, which they weren't. Okay, so Sarbanes-Oxley was put in place. So part of Sarbanes-Oxley is that every year, every 2 years, the auditor needs to change. Needs to be a new auditor that has not worked in that company, not worked for that company in any capacity, right? And so they rotate auditors now, right? So you did Apple 2 years in a row or last year, no more Apple for you for the next 5 years. You're gonna go over here to HP or to Adobe or something like that. They don't know you, cool, right? You did Adobe, you're going, on in this company, but you're gonna do the international branch of this company. You're not gonna do domestic anymore, right? And so they put all these provisions and these rules in place so that when the auditors do come in, there's no undue influence. There's no favoritism. There's no relationship to where we're comfortable. Where like, oh, hey, you coming to that birthday party for my daughter? Or, hey, remember last week we went golfing? That was a good time. Not golfing with auditors. You're not golfing with you're not golfing with police officers. You're not you guys do, does anyone here golf with IRS auditors? Do you know anybody that works in the IRS? No. Okay. That's because they make sure to keep a line. There's a line not to be crossed. All right. Same thing with us. All right. There's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Right. We're not going. I'm not having drinks with my students. Right. Unless it's coffee and we're discussing something educational, academia, or I'm helping you out with something, right? Or I'm your chair or something like that. And even then, it's recorded. We're just talking about doctoral stuff, and we move on. We're not hanging out. Okay, we're not going to each other's houses, eating dinner, none of that. Okay, not that I don't like you guys. I'm sure we'll be great friends, but in the capacity that I'm in the capacity you are, there's no room for that. Okay, Our relationship is strictly professor, student, right? Respect, right? Admiration, and I'm here to make sure that you get your education, or at least I'm informing you the best I can. You're here to learn, assess, and move on, right? After that, we can be friends, right? Because I have a lot of students, while they're in school, they send me stuff like LinkedIn requests or Facebook requests. I don't do that, okay? Because there's a perception that needs to be upheld, right? I don't need the school to look at me and say, man, you're friends with a lot of people in your classes, and you guys are going back and forth about like trivial things, right? Did you go to that person's house for their party? Were you at the bar with this student taking tequila shots? Right? Now, this happens quite often, right? This is when you have the professor that's sleeping with the students, right? That's unethical, right? But it happens quite often. Big universities happens very often, okay? So what we don't want is undue influence, right? Oh, why are you so comfy? Why are you so cozy with the student, right? Check the student's grades. Student got an A. Failed every test. Come on in. Failed every test. Never went to class, but somehow got an A. I don't know how that was. Oh, well, the student had extra credit. Let's see it. The extra credit was at your house? That doesn't count. Okay? Extra credit was after class? Doesn't count. Okay? You violated ethical standards for a professor, right? That relationship that was going on, right? And so service actually, it really kind of pushed, for internal controls, but it wasn't, nothing is perfect, right? As I said, there's the the language may be perfect, the concept may be perfect, but the imperfection is in the execution, right? Because we're humans, okay? We are prone to self-interest, okay? Because without self-interest, nothing would have happened. You need self-interest. It's a good thing, right? Because if you weren't self-interested in your own goals and ambitions and dreams, what's the purpose of me being here? Right? Your self-interest is driving me being here. Right? So it's important and it's necessary, but there has to be a line that's not crossed to where your self-interest becomes more important than the group's self-interest or violates laws that are here to protect everyone in the entity. Right? When your self-interest becomes more important, that's when the issues arise, right? Because then you start making bad decisions, right? You start looking at things from your benefit, not the organizational benefit, right? Or not for the benefit of the team, right? Or your family, for instance, right? Someone with a gambling habit, right? They're self-interested in their own gambling endeavors, right? They don't mind taking the rent money or the mortgage money and going to gamble with it because they feel like they're gonna win. When they don't win, most of the time they don't, guess what? We can't pay the mortgage, we can't pay the rent. Now we're a month, 2 months, 3 months behind. Guess what's coming? Foreclosure. Oh, now we're sleeping in the car. Now we're out on the streets. Okay? So self-interest is good, but once it starts becoming more about too much about you and not everyone else or the greater good, we start having issues, right? Because you start making bad decisions. Let me see here. All right. So legal duties of board members, right? The duty of care, which exercise of reasonable care by ensuring that executives carry out responsibility and comply with the law. Duty of good faith, all right? One of obedience, requiring faithfulness to the organization mission. And duties of loyalty, requires faithfulness from board members by giving undivided allegiance when making decisions affecting the organization, right? So these are all the duties that board members have, right? And they take a legal oath. They take an oath of office, sort of, right? To be a board member. And they promise that we're gonna do everything and to the best of our ability to fulfill our duties. Okay? Duty of care, duty of good faith, duty of loyalty, right? We want to make sure that we take care of the consumer. Okay? We want to make sure that all the actions taken are those in the best interest of the organization and the consumer. Right? So the board serves a great purpose, serves a huge purpose in keeping the C-suite, the executives in check, right? And saying like, look, I know you want to do this, but you can't. Too much, right? In order for Elon Musk is different. Let's see. Who wanted to change things? I think. I can't think of any I one off the top of my head, but if there's a change the CEO wants to make and it's a substantive change, they have to go to the board. If the board says, no, we're not going to invest in that, that's that. Okay. So if you look around San Diego and a lot of the initiatives that are going on, let's just say San Diego City, not county, right? We have Mayor Todd Gloria. He has a council. Okay. His council is his board, right? But he also have a board of governors, right? And the board of governors is more about business aspect, right? Business transaction. His council, his city council is about the functioning of the city, right? But things don't happen unless the city council agrees. The mayor just can't unilaterally go, hey, we're gonna buy this building, right? Which happened here probably like 5 years ago with the previous mayor, Mayor Kevin Faulkner. There's a building on Ash and A. Okay, 101 Ash Street, right? Huge high rise, right? The company that was given the contract or had the contract to build the building, they had all these plans, they were gonna come in, build this building, and then they were gonna bring all these companies in and, fill, rent out the spaces and that kind of thing. The company went belly up, right? And basically the building was pretty much 75% done, but not all the way done, right? And so we're just sitting there, right? Partway supported by bonds provided by the city, okay? And so what Kevin Faulkner decided to do was like, you know what? We should buy the building. And they're like, why would we buy this building? What are we going to do with it? We have nothing that we can do with this building. It'd be a waste of money. $150 million was the offering price or the price to buy the building. Somehow, he got to some of the members of the council, and they end up buying the building. Okay, so maybe a year after, 2 years after, kind of find out he's buddies with the guy who was on the dime for the building. He's buddies with the guy that was gonna have to fork over probably $150 million because the building was useless. You built the building, or you were gonna build the building. You have no residents coming in. Your company went belly up. So how are you gonna pay these loans back, right? Well, if I have somebody come in and buy the building, we're good, right? And that's exactly what happened. He bought the building as the mayor for the city of San Diego, right? Now, we still own the building. It's empty, just sitting there, not doing nothing. And they're trying to figure out, okay, what to do with it, right? He got in trouble, right? But because he didn't, he couldn't unilaterally do it, he had to get council members to agree to buy it, right? So he's really not 100% culpable because he got the city council. He went about the right way is the fact that he was friends with the person who was on the hook for it, and that person had some undue influence on him, which he exerted on the council. Okay, and we expended money, city funds that should have been spent elsewhere. Right, same thing with you guys familiar with the reactor by Pendleton. You drive up the 5, you look to the left. When you get past into Orange County, sort of, right? you'll see the reactor, right? We dumped a bunch of money in the reactor, right? The reactor is not active. It's not open at all. City funds, okay? The reason it's not open is because they did a lot of unethical things to get that reactor up and to get the money for the reactor, right? SDG&E did some funny stuff with that. And so, if you ever look at your SDG&E bill, once every quarter or so, you'll get a credit, right? Check your bill every once in a while. They usually send you an email and tell you that it's going to happen. $30 credit, $70 credit. That's from the fines that SDG&E had to pay the city of San Diego for the whole reactor debacle. Okay, so they're paying the city back by giving credits to the consumer for electricity, right? And it fluctuates. It could be sometimes it's $35, sometimes $70. It all depends on whatever they agreed upon, right? But all these things are all things that corporate governance really should be taken care of. Okay, if the board is asleep at the wheel, you have all these things happening, right? If the board doesn't really have any teeth to hold the CEO accountable, you have problems, right? This is why sometimes it's hard when you have an owner who has majority ownership, but you have a board, right? Because even if the board votes 10 out of 10 to say no, we're not gonna do this, as a majority owner, forget what you guys are talking about doing anyway. Okay? You put the company in a bad position, but if you're the majority owner, it's technically your company, right? Now, you may expend shares or expend funds that could otherwise be used in a better manner, and you have to live with the results. Sometimes they're great, other times they're not, right? Companies go down, they go bankrupt because the CEO or the corporate board or whoever made the decision, that really didn't work out. Okay, that really didn't pan out. So you got to be really careful about the stakeholders and who's really managing all that stuff, right? Who's managing the money? Accounting, especially in finances, right? As an accountant, right? As somebody who owns a business, as an entrepreneur, you should have a pretty good understanding of accounting. Okay, P&Ls, okay, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, income statements, consolidated worksheets or consolidated reports, right? GAAP principles, general accounting, and generally accepted accounting principles. You should have a pretty good understanding of debits and credits and accounts receivables, account payables, that kind of thing, basic stuff, right? And if you don't, you will get cooked, right? The term cooking the books is an accounting term, right? Everybody's heard of cooking the books. Ever heard that term before, right? They say it in movies and stuff like that, right? But normally it's associated with, entities that are dealing in legal activities, right? Or in most movies you'll see they always have two sets of books, right? You got the one set of books who got the legit numbers that being presented, and you have the real books that have the names attached to them, where the money's going, all this other stuff, right? Hey, we sent a bribe to chief of police, 100,000. That's in this set of books. This set of books, this 100,000, it went to private investigator, it went to construction project. We can show you right here. This is where the money went, right? Accountants can do miraculous things with the books. Okay, so you have to be up on it. Because if you're not up on it, you're gonna get robbed. Okay, and you can see that in many athletes. This is where they lose a large majority of their money. Or, for instance, there's something that's current right now. Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber is about to sue his management company for $300 million because he alleges that they mismanaged his funds when he was making, he's still making money, of course, $300 million that he said they mismanaged, right? And Justin Bieber, I don't know how much he's worth, but he's definitely worth more than that, right? But he's suing him for $300 million because that's he didn't understand accounting. He didn't have anyone that understood accounting that was really a fiduciary for him, right? And you see a lot of athletes, they lose money because somebody is stealing their money. Even Kevin Hart, right? I think 2 years ago, one of his assistants took $5 million. Otani, we just had that instance, right? Where his interpreter took what, 6 million or $18 million from him to pay off his gambling debts. He had access to Otani's accounts. He was taking a little bit of money here and there, and because Otani wasn't really doing the proper accounting, doing the proper, reconciling and making sure that everything was good, this guy was just siphoning money out the account. Nobody was checking him. Okay, to the tune of $18 million. When you get to a certain amount of money, you probably don't look at your bank account every day, right? You rely on your CPAs, your accountants to kind of manage those things for you, right? And that's exactly what happened, right? He relied on his manager, this guy, this interpreter. He gave him access to all his accounts, and he just took $18 million, just like that, right? So when it comes to accounting, if you make any real serious money, whether it be the lottery, whether it be through investments, whatever it is, right? Yes, have an accountant, have a CPA, but you should also have a third-party auditor that has nothing to do with any of those guys to come in every quarter or so to check the books for you, right? Where's my money going? These checks I'm signing, where do they really go, right? What is this company? Who is this person that I'm paying money to? Like $1 million for what? What are we doing exactly, right? You have to stay on top of it, right? Just as much if it's just $50,000 as much as $50 million. You've got to keep track of that stuff. And you ask any of these guys that are loaded, that are rich, they know where all their money's going. They talk to their accountants all the time, where the accounts would tell you, or my favorite stories are the ones from like Shaq and some of these other superstar athletes, right, who have lots of money now, right? But they'll tell you when they first started, they would spend their money on fancy cars, houses, give all their friends money. And the accountant would call them and say, look, you keep spending money like this, you're gonna be broke tomorrow. Stop spending this kind of money. Right? And they go, wait a minute, I just got a $10 million check. What are you talking about? Well, first thing, $3 million of that is gone already because guess what? Uncle Sam needs their cut, right? 30% at least for athletes, right? God forbid you live in California. There's another 10% athlete tax. And you guys knew that, right? So that's why you don't see a lot of athletes or a lot of superstars wanting to come to San Diego, wanting to come to California, because there's additional athlete tax. There's 10%. So now you're talking 40%, right off the top is gone. Okay? Then you got state taxes, right? So federal taxes, state taxes, athlete tax, right? All gone. Right? So 45% of your money's already gone. Right? So say you have an $18 million contract over 3 years, right? So that's $6 million a year. Half of that's gone already before you even get it. Right? And so this is how a lot of these guys get in trouble because they're not having good accounting, right? They're spending money thinking the $6 million is their net when it's not. You haven't paid Uncle Sam, you haven't paid the state taxes, you haven't paid the athlete tax if there's one. You haven't done anything. So you can't go around maintaining this lifestyle, right? And not understanding where the money's going and how it's being divvied up, right? And a lot of people get in trouble that way, where they're living beyond their means because on paper they made, let me see, what's the biggest contract that just happened? I think, well, LeBron, let's just say LeBron. LeBron just got a 1 year contract, right? Anybody know how much he's getting for 1 year for the Lakers? 50 million. $50 million for 1 year. Okay? Out of that 50 million, because he's in California, of course, 10% of that's gone already. Right? So 5 million is chucked, right? 30% of that is gone already. Right? So it's another 15 million gone. So that's 20 million right off the bat, gone. So it's 50 million with the 30 million, right? What about the agent? Right? He has an agent, right? Rich Paul. clutch agency, right? How much you think they get? At least 10%. Okay? And not 10% of the 30 million, 10% of the 50 million. Okay? You have to understand the basis. What is the basis? The basis is not the amount that you pay after taxes. The basis is the amount that was guaranteed in the contract. So $50 million is the basics, and we work from there. Okay? So we got 30% to the government, we got 10% at least to the agent, we got the athlete tax, right? So that 50 million basically is 25 million right now. Okay. What else do we got? We got some other stuff, some other miscellaneous taxes we gotta pay and fees and all kind of nonsense, right? So basically that $50 million is really $20 million at the end of the day for the year. Now for LeBron, no big deal because he has numerous streams of income. He's gonna get another probably year, $50 million, maybe $60 million, who knows, right? Depending on how much they want to keep him, right? But he generates more than that for them, for the company, right? So it's okay. But the fact is that he watches every penny that comes in. He knows where his money's going, right? Because he has other things going on and he understands he's leveraging his assets, right? And that's what really having a board is for, right? Making sure that the things that are going on in the company, right, are done above board and we're doing them legal, right? Okay, what time is it? 6:45. 6:45. All right. If you need to take a break, take a quick 5-minute break. I'm gonna stop here and then you guys can start the final that you want. Okay. Ali's here to take the final. Who is this Zoom user?
Hello?
Yes, it's Dr. Case. Who is this?
No, this is me, Faris Atiani.
Oh, Ferris. Okay. Ferris, you can't take the final with me
Why is that, sir?
because you're a hybrid student. So you have to set up a proctor session to take it. If you were an online student, you could come into the class and take it.
Oh, with Miss Andy O'Brien.
Yeah, you can't take it with me because you're hybrid. You should be here.
I was skeptical about that too myself. I'm sorry.
Ferris,
But
are you
now,
online?
yeah.
Are you no? Listen, are you an online student or a hybrid student?
So my there was a change that happened to my status here. So because of it, I can attend only online, according to what I understand, and I provided Miss Carol with my with the update of my
I'm gonna.
paper status.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just check what they got you here as.
I'm supposed to be hybrid.
Yeah. So yeah, you're online. Okay, so you can take it with me. You're
Oh, if
good.
I
Yeah,
oh
they have you down as an online student, so you're good. You can take it with me.
oh okay okay
Okay, you're good. You're good to go. Okay.
okay cool.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put out the password here in a minute, and you're good to go. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Mr. Ali. Ali.
Hello, doctor.
Good. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. How's everything?
Everything's good. Everything's good. All
Oh,
right.
you
Unfortunately,
still you
huh?
always look gentle, huh? With the tuxedo style.
I have to just change it up.
I swear,
Um,
number one with wearing clothes.
got you. Hey, unfortunately, you can't take the exam with me.
Yeah.
You have to call the school and set up a proctor station session.
Well, with the Miss Andy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, because you're hybrid, and I know you're not here. I know you're still in Jordan.
I appreciate it.
So you can take it online, but not with me. You have to set up one with the
Yeah,
school.
I know how's the process. I gotta go to the Zoom and I prepare it with Miss Andy. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, no
As
worries.
much I appreciate, it's nice to hear from you, but you gotta take it with them. Okay.
Yeah, sure, but I just want to show some respect. At least if it's possible, I can do it now. But since it's
Uh,
the rules, we should do it with him.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know, hey, you
I
know, there
know,
was
I
no
know
way to
you.
do it, I would do it, but
Yeah,
no way
I
to
know, I
do it.
know. Yeah, I really
Um,
appreciate you.
when you
You
coming
know,
back?
I usually call you boss because you really understand us. I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah.
When you
So
coming back?
hopefully in 3 days I'll be there.
Okay, okay, good. Look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, yeah. Next three
All right.
days I'll be here, inshallah. Okay, brother. I really appreciate you, boss.
Okay, no worries. And
Okay,
hope to see you soon, okay?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But you will see me walking with a stick.
That's
Don't
okay.
panic, huh?
That's all right.
I'll be the godfather of the school from now.
Yeah, that's all right. Just don't
Yeah,
beat nobody up, okay?
yeah, yeah. Okay. No.
All right.
Okay. Nice to talk to
Okay,
you.
I'll see you later.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
What did you get hurt?
Yeah, he had surgery on his back. He had a bulging disc. So he got stuck
He had surgery
in
the
Jordan.
States?
No, in Jordan. Yeah, he was in Jordan and then it turned out to be emergency surgery.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have a
So,
herniated disc, but they all told me that I'm too young.
oh, really? Yeah, I think he basically. Sure. So you there? Oh my goodness. Anyway, all right.
It almost says one participant down there.
Yeah. All right, that's the password. So get started. You got an hour, I think, and once you're done, you're free to leave. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you all, and I'll see you next session. Okay. So you guys can everybody can see the password. Oh, there he is. Okay, there he is. He's back. Oops. Fresh, you got the password?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you.
No problem.